The draft peace plan to end Russia's war against Ukraine, revised together with European partners, has been submitted for consideration to the United States. Why are there only 20 points left out of the original 28? Which issues remain unresolved? And why has the aggressor country Russia once again started accusing the European Union of undermining Donald Trump's peace initiatives? Let's figure it out. So, after visits to London, Rome, and Brussels, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy announced that the draft peace plan had been significantly revised, and in its latest version, and I quote, there are no longer any openly non-Ukrainian points. Every line of this document was agreed upon with European partners. And this is quite understandable, since what's at stake is not only the fate of Ukraine, but of all of Europe. And it's very important not to let peace initiatives be replaced by attempts to pressure the victim of aggression. Contentious issues still remain. As the head of state emphasized, almost all of them concern territories. In addition, Ukraine needs clear and long-term security guarantees, as well as an understanding of how its allies will act in the event of new threats from Russia.
There is a framework document consisting of 20 points. It is constantly changing, and that's normal. It's a living structure that should serve the interests of Ukraine, Europe, and the world. The second point is security guarantees. We are working on this. I am waiting for the relevant proposal from our military and their dialogue with the Americans. And all of this needs to be combined with the principles of the coalition of the willing. Security guarantees are an important document between us, the US, and the Europeans. The third document concerns reconstruction. This is a project that should work after the war ends, or there's a ceasefire. Volodymyr Zelenskyy, president of Ukraine.
European leaders are carefully reading literally every letter of the draft. After all, vague wording or concessions will only push the Kremlin toward further aggression. Cyber attacks, election interference, violations of European countries' airspace, cable sabotage, and warehouse fires. This is already a reality for Europe. As British columnist John Compner writes in his column for Politico, EU countries are in a dangerous and vulnerable position. That's why everything that is currently written and agreed upon is part of the future security architecture of the continent for many years to come.
In a situation where the US administration is increasingly taking on the role of an unreliable intermediary rather than a loyal ally, Europe finds itself in a dangerous position. And what struck me most during the series of security briefings and conferences I attended in Berlin and elsewhere this fall was the sheer scale of anxiety. If Europe wants to survive a future attack from Russia, and that's exactly how it's being phrased, its major players must act in ways they never have before. They must act as one, inseparably. John Kampfner, columnist for Politico.
That's why at the London meeting between the President of Ukraine, the Prime Minister of the UK, the President of France, and the Chancellor of Germany, they discussed a strategy for further pressure on Russia. The leaders agreed on key directions: security guarantees for Kyiv and continued defense support. Only Ukraine can determine its own future, and any ceasefire must be long-term. The Allies reaffirmed their intention to continue working together to achieve a just and lasting peace.
We support Ukraine, and if a truce is reached, it must be fair and enduring. That's why it's so important to always remember that decisions about Ukraine are made only with Ukraine. We are ready to support you both in the struggle and in negotiations, as well as to ensure a fair and lasting settlement if we manage to achieve this goal.
Pope Leo XIV also said that trying to reach a peace agreement without involving Europe is unrealistic. During his meeting with Volodymyr Zelenskyy at the Castel Gandolfo residence, the pontiff stated that since Russia started the war on the European continent, it is Europe that must participate in the security guarantee system. The Pope did not evaluate the U.S. President's administration's peace plan project, but noted that some of its provisions could affect relations between Europe and the U.S., and that certain statements by Donald Trump could seriously weaken this alliance.
I truly believe that Europe's role is very important. The unity of European countries is of great significance, especially in this case. Aiming for a peace agreement without including Europe in the negotiations is unrealistic. The war is happening in Europe. I think that in the security guarantees that are needed today, and will be needed in the future, Europe must be part of the process. Unfortunately, not everyone understands this. But I believe that European leaders have a great opportunity to unite and seek solutions together.
Unwavering support for Ukraine was also confirmed in Brussels. There, Volodymyr Zelenskyy held a meeting with the President of the European Council, Antonio Costa, the head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, and NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. The leaders agreed to strengthen military cooperation and support for Kyiv, including through new aid packages as part of the alliance's defense initiatives. At the same time, European leaders noted that not enough pressure is being exerted on Russia yet, even though the aggressor understands the language of force and sanctions best of all.
We see agreements and discussions between Ukraine and the United States, as well as between the United States and Russia. What we also clearly see is that there isn't much pressure being put on Russia. We cannot end up in a situation where a peace agreement effectively rewards aggression, because then there will be more of the same. The EU has set out a number of conditions that are its red lines. I mean, respect for the territorial integrity and sovereignty of the Ukrainian people, as well as the return of Ukrainian children. And we have all these points. I think it's important that we continue to raise these issues when it comes to putting pressure on Russia.
Instead of pressuring Kyiv and pushing it toward a rushed deal by Donald Trump's negotiators, it would be better to work together with European allies on a package of security guarantees for Ukraine and economic incentives. This is what the respected columnist David Ignatius writes in his column for The Washington Post. He is convinced that any attempts to force agreements will only undermine trust and turn diplomacy into mere bargaining.
The biggest mistake Trump could make is to insist on an all-or-nothing approach, now or never. That's not how diplomacy works, just like that's not how good business is done. As Trump noted several decades ago, the worst thing you can do in a deal is to show that you're desperate to close it. That will make the other side smell blood, and then you're finished. Trump should strike a reasonable and long-term deal. Otherwise, he could end up with nothing, and this conflict could escalate into an even more destructive phase. David Ignatius, columnist for The Washington Post.
Ukraine's accession to the EU could also become part of security guarantees and strengthen Europe's defense architecture. And this point absolutely must be included in the peace plan. Kyiv's partners are convinced. So it's no surprise that another fit of hysteria has erupted in the Kremlin. And once again, they're shouting that Europe is trying to undermine President Trump's diplomatic efforts. In reality, all the aggressor wants is to sow discord between Washington and Brussels and weaken support for Kiev. After all, Putin has no intention of ending the bloody war against Ukraine or agreeing to any compromises.
Subscribe to The Gaze and stay updated on the most important events, top news from Ukraine and all over the world, in-depth analysis, exclusive reports and interviews, all on hand in our channel. Join our community of viewers and stay tuned.